We'll start now. Hi, my name is Amber Sapper, and I will be the first speaker for the government affirming the resolution that this House regrets the popularity of the core curriculum in colleges and universities. First, on framework. Popularity is defined as just like the widespread and accepted use of core curriculum and the prevalence of it in colleges and universities. A core curriculum is defined as a required mix of humanities, language arts, physical education, science, and math courses that are required for you to graduate from that college and university. Usually, it's between 5 and 10 courses per college, but it varies slightly. This house will be defined as the average college student, and the weighing mechanism is net benefits to college education. So whichever side can prove that they will create the most education for these students will win. My first contention is that core curriculum makes students waste time. Subpoint A is that students already have a general knowledge basis, right? All students in college and university have already graduated from high school, and generally, depending on the level of the university, they have graduated with very high grades, which means in high school, there are laws about requirements that they have to take. So most students in college, or in fact, all students in college, they've already taken 3 years of English, 3 years of social studies, 2 years of math, 2 years of science, 1 year of art, and 1 year of language, and usually, a lot more of each of these. So this means that it's not like these students don't already have a basis of math, English, and all of these other like general knowledge things that they need to function in the world. Subpoint B is that further information that they're required to take in college will probably be useless. So realistically, if a student thinks that they are going to need to use a certain skill in their future life, then they're going to take that class while in college, right? If a student thinks to themselves, I think that my future job is going to need a lot of math, then they're going to take math, which means that all the students who are just being forced to, they're probably not going to take this or use these skills otherwise, right? If an art student says, no, I'm probably never going to use math in my life, or at least not beyond the math that I already learned in high school, then being forced to take that class would just be completely useless added information that they won't use further in their life. Subpoint C is that it's unwanted information, right? People don't like being forced to do things that they don't want to do, and they're going to be unhappy in that class. Subpoint D is taking that class takes time away from other things, right? So if you're forced to take a class that won't really be helpful to you, you're not able to spend as much time focusing on the classes that you actually want to take and the classes that you actually want to, or that actually you will use in your professional life. This means that they're not actually able to learn as much about the things that are actually going to be come up a lot in their future, and they won't be able to take as many classes they care about, which means that overall they're going to be getting a worse education because their education is not going to be helping them as much as it otherwise could be in their future. Subpoint E is that this leads to higher levels of unhappiness and higher levels of dropouts. So when people are more stressed, they're more likely to drop out, right? When people are more unhappy in college, they're more likely to drop out. And dropping out leads to a huge amount of wasted time because then you've spent years in college that you aren't even getting a bachelor's degree for. You're not getting the monetary benefit in your future. And it was just a huge waste of time going to college at all. So the impacts here we're going to see is there's a huge reduction in quality of life of students because they're being forced to do things that they don't want to do and that are making them unhappy. But then furthermore, there is a lower quality of the education they're getting because the education they're being forced to get is not actually best suited to their future. My second contention is wasting money. Subpoint A is that college is very expensive. I don't really need to warrant this, but the average college costs between $20,000 up to like $100,000 a year. And it costs a lot of money. Subpoint B is that having core curriculum is just wasting money because with that amount of money that you're spending to get into college, you're then taking classes that aren't actually benefiting you long term. So the average cost of a college class, when you divide the number of college classes you take, is about $1,000. So if you're taking a minimum of, say, 5 core curriculum classes, that is $5,000 that you are wasting taking classes that won't actually help you in the future. Subpoint C is that this affects your life, while you're in college. It leads to, more stress about money and more feeling that, you're just wasting money in college because you're not actually learning things that will help you. Subpoint D is that, again, it leads to a lot of, wasting money if you drop out. So we've already proved to you that being forced to take these classes has led to higher levels of dropout. And so when people drop out, they've wasted a ton of money because then they've spent money to go to college, but they're not getting the monetary benefits associated long-term with having a bachelor's degree. So the impacts here are, again, you have a lower quality of life, and you end up wasting a lot of money that you can never make up. My third contention is that it's detrimental to the college learning environment. Subpoint A is that students in these classes won't be passionate, right? So if you're taking a class that you don't really like, that you don't really want to be in, you are not going to try very hard in that class, and you're not going to engage a lot in that class. So subpoint B is that this hurts all students because it encourages procrastination and encourages people to not show up, and generally, encourages an environment in that class where everyone's not trying to learn. The subpoint C is that it actually especially hurts the students that really do care about the subject. So imagine you're taking a class, you really care about the class, but 95% of the students in your class are only taking it to fill requirements. That means that you're not going to have as good class discussion. You're not going to be learning as much from your peers, and this is seriously harming your college overall. So the impacts here, again, lower quality of life and less education. I strongly affirm. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Just before I start my time, my name is Maya Young. I'll be speaking first for the negation, and as a quick off-time roadmap of the points I'll be going over in my speech, we have 2 contentions for the negation, and then I'll be answering the aff contentions in the order they were read. Okay. That I have 8 minutes. Is anyone not ready? So, my time starts. Hi, judges. Today, I'm proud to negate the resolution that this House regrets the popularity of the core curriculum in colleges and universities. Actually, before I go into my contentions, I forgot to mention, I'm just going to quickly cover some points on framework. I'd like to contest their definition of this House as the average college student, and instead say that we should redefine it as the average person, not just the college student. And the reason why is because we think that by kind of taking a step back and just being anyone looking at a college system will help us look more at the big picture. Because often the average college student simply doesn't actually know what they want later on, because their brains are still developing, they're still exploring opportunities, they don't really know. And we think that as a result that we should be looking at net benefits overall in this resolution, because there are more impacts on the world, there are more impacts on college students beyond just their education, and for them, how that'll impact them in the future. Hopefully that isn't just too big of an issue. We just kind of want to take a bigger picture look at how this resolution is going to affect the whole world, not just college education, or not just what college students think at the time. With that, let's get into our first contention, which is simply that having a well-rounded education is good. And there are a couple of reasons why. Firstly is that everyone just needs basic skills, because, look to scientists who need writing and communication skills in order to publish literature or present their findings. And what we see is that having a core curriculum will encourage students to branch out from their major, because they have to take other classes other than solely the ones that they need to graduate, which will force them to be exposed to a variety of well-taught college-level classes. And when we see is that when we have these basic skills and when we expose people to different subjects, this will help create a more educated population. In fact, a study found that at schools without core curriculum, roughly 25% of students cannot distinguish Churchill's words from Stalin's, or Karl Marx's thoughts from the ideas of the United States Constitution, which are pretty different things in my opinion, which means that exposing them to classes like English, like history, that can teach them the difference between these things is probably pretty important. And this is really critical for democratic participation. Having a basic understanding of our nation's function and the importance of civic participation is critical to developing a strong population that makes educated decisions. Thirdly, we see another part of core curriculum is cultural education, which is really important. As the affirmation points out, and just generally, colleges have begun to create requirements for taking classes on ethnicity, culture groups, and foreign languages, which are all key to developing a conscience of other ethnic groups. In fact, a study found that people's attitudes toward other racial and ethnic groups actually improve significantly when they develop a better understanding of the other ethnicities' cultural practices. And what we see is that by educating people, this can help decrease and root out violence in the form of racism and bigotry. Another part of a core curriculum is physical education, which is also pretty important. It was also pretty important because what we see is that by having students have to take physical education, this is key to instilling just long-term habits of healthy living, of getting exercise, and helping people kind of get an escape from stressful classes. So on the impact level, we see that having this well-rounded education that exposes people to many different topics, including cultural and physical education, is important for a couple of reasons. One is that just being educated is important because we need to be able to understand and just trust science when it comes to things like climate change. We need to be able to have the critical thinking skills to identify misinformation during elections. Specifically, having a well-rounded education will also better prepare students for the future job market. In fact, 2 national surveys found that a large majority of the American public and nearly 3/4 of business leaders say it is more important for job candidates to be well-rounded with a range of abilities than to have industry-specific skills. And this also makes sense because people who have experience in different fields, working even on subjects they may not be completely comfortable with, will probably make better, well-rounded candidates that are more appealing to these jobs, which has important impacts on employment levels. Our second contention is about encouraging exploration, because as we know, the core curriculum pushes people to explore classes they wouldn't try otherwise. And this is really important, again, because the average college student often doesn't actually totally know what they want. They're still teenagers, their brains are still developing, and having a structured curriculum will prevent students from locking themselves into one major too early on. What we see is that as a result, by taking these different classes, one, this allows students to meet peers that they wouldn't have met otherwise, especially when the demographics of certain majors like computer science or engineering are often so homogenous, but it also allows people to find classes that they're truly interested in. Studies show that at least 80% of college students change their major throughout their college education. So this means that having opportunities and being encouraged to explore other subjects are really critical to finding what students are actually interested in. A core curriculum can also make it easier for students to change their majors because they won't be as far behind on graduation requirements to get their degree. On the impact level, we can see that this actually has an important impact on quality of life and making students actually passionate about what they're learning, because they'll be able to explore things and find new things that they're passionate about versus maybe the major that their parents told them would be the best idea. This can also give them more potential for networking and, again, meeting different peers and meeting professors in different classes. Now let's go on to talking about the affirmative case, starting with the first contention about, wasting time. The overview argument here is that our opponents would like you to believe that college students know everything. They can predict exactly what field they'll end up in, exactly what classes they'll enjoy taking, and exactly what will be useful to them. However, unfortunately, a lot of the time, this is just not the case. Again, 80% of college students change their major. That's pretty significant, which means even if students have taken some core classes in high school, going into college and just completely locking yourself into one major, removing these students from all fields other than their major is going to take those skills away. It's going to kind of make them forget their high school education, especially it's kind of going to make we still need to expose them to different topics and build up different skills. People go to college for a reason because they want more than their high school education. They specifically give you the example of our students taking math and how it just gives them unwanted information and makes them kind of more stressed. But there are a couple of arguments here. One is that, again, art students still probably need to learn how to do things like managing finance and doing basic algebra or other further math classes or sciences. And these classes can fulfill multiple categories. And specifically on the argument about wasting time and taking away time from other things that are actually applicable to these students, the argument here we would say is false, because there are still major requirements. Students still have to take classes that are important to them. 3/4 of their education is still for their major, but we still see that taking the core curriculum is important. Another argument here is that major is distinct from passions. Just because you major in something doesn't actually mean you're passionate about it, because again, students don't 100% know what they want when they enter college. So exposing them to different topics is important. On the second contention about wasting money, the overview here is that the monetary benefits associated with going to college come with a well-rounded education. Because again, it's about building these critical thinking skills, building a diverse perspective, instilling healthy habits. All these things are really important. And considering that 80% of students, again, switch majors, all of your classes will go to waste if you don't have a core curriculum. Because, and especially again, as we talk about, when it's really important for the job market, when the job market cares about you getting a well-rounded education and being competent in other subjects, it's probably more monetarily beneficial if students have a core curriculum. Finally, on the third contention about the college learning environment, the overview here is that, again, the affirmation here assumes that the regular student doesn't care about anything outside their major. But the fact of the matter is, people do care about other subjects. That's probably why they're pursuing a higher education and going to college. They say that students won't be passionate about these classes, but we actually see that many people enjoy experimenting. Many people like trying new things. Many people like challenging themselves rather than just, staying what they're comfortable with. And we specifically talking about passionate students, we see that, again, there's a difference between, we specifically see that on these classes, there are different classes for majors versus class requirements. There's intro level courses and there's advanced major courses. There will still be passionate students in these students' classes. So for all these reasons, I strongly urge a vote for the affirmation or negation.
All right, everybody. Oh, sorry about that. Hope the audio is all good now. Just for a quick introduction, hello, my name is Violet Philhauer. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the second speaker on the government side. So just for a quick roadmap, I will start on the opposition's flow and then go over to the government's flow. And so with that, we will go ahead and start this speech. So first, on the contesting framework that the opposition has provided of having this House be an average person, we have several responses to this. The first is that, one, they have not proven that our weighing mechanisms, that our definition is inherently abusive, right? They still have plenty of ground under our definition, and we're not taking away any major ground from them because it's pretty easy to argue. The second response to this is that we should actually be thinking from the perspective of somebody who is actually affected by this resolution, right? This resolution is essentially considering whether or not we would have these core curriculums in college, and the people who are actually affected by this is college students. It's not, a kid, right? Which is kind of who they're considering, because they're kind of considering it as the general population, but we should be considering this as somebody who's actually affected by the resolution. But regardless of what we're going by, we can still prove that the disadvantages of having core curriculum still stand under both cases, because it is still detrimental to the life of a college student and to the college environment, regardless of whether you're considering it as from the perspective of a college individual or as a general average rational individual. So with that out of the way, let's get into their first contention of having a well-rounded good education. So our first response to this is that the truth of the matter is you already have a well-rounded education, and you have a well-rounded education from high school, because in high school, there are lots of requirements, right? You have to basically cover every subject area. You have to take lots of math, science, art, physical education. You have to get all those things because the goal of high school is to give you a well-rounded education. So you already have a well-rounded education. So truly, college is doing nothing but repeating the things you already know. So truly, college is not contributing anything to your education, because it is simply repeating things you already know and taking away your time from taking things that you could, from learning actual new things from new college courses. In addition, they say that taking these core curriculums lets you branch out more and that change your major more, and that you can't really take classes outside your major. But the truth is that in college you get elective slots. You are able to take courses outside of your major, right? If you're an art major, if you want to, you can still go take a science class if that is interesting to you. But the truth is, if you're this art major, you're not being required to take this science class, so you can opt into it. So this art major would actually be taking a science class that they care about, not being mandated to take a science class that they don't care about anyway. So basically, the whole point of this is that in college, you are still able to take courses outside your major. You're still able to explore, still able to, diversify your education. You just diversify it in ways that actually are interesting to you and actually benefit your life, because they're providing you with something that actually helps you and is actually interesting. So moving down to their point about cultural diversity, truly any benefits to education aren't going to be benefiting you if you don't care about what's happening in those classes. again, college students are already extremely stressed. And if you're trying to throw them into an environment where they're not passionate about the subject, they don't want to be there, they're not going to be putting in that much work and they're not going to be getting that much learning out of it. So any impacts on education and really cultural diversity aren't going to be existing because that person is going to care about these classes where they might be learning about cultural diversity simply because they don't want to be there. So these impacts of cultural diversity really don't apply to the majority of college students because they don't want to be there. Also, they bring up this point of like better democracy, but the truth is a democracy is worse and like people are going to be worse at voting if they're dropping out of college because they're having extreme monetary stress, they're having extreme disappointment in their curriculum, and they're just having extreme burnout, right? We want a base of voters who are educated, and we want a base of voters who had a good college experience and will encourage others to go to college. And the way we get that is by having them take classes they actually care about, so they'll finish their college education and encourage others to go as well. In addition, they bring up this point of physical education, but their main response to this is like, in a world without like core curriculums, we aren't taking away the opportunity for physical education. This applies to like a lot of their points, but they seem to think that like some resources are only accessible if you have these core curriculums. But the fact is that many colleges have gyms and many colleges have state-of-the-art gyms, such as CSU Long Beach has one of the best gyms in the country, right? People still have access to PE classes. People still have access to the gym. And, in a world without core curriculums, now they're just doing it because they actually want to, right? They talk about these long-term habits, but you're not going to be forming long-term habits if you're being required to take a PE class that you're not actually interested in. It's just going to really turn you off from physical education because you didn't want to be there in the first place. So moving down, so basically they also have this point about how it's like, on their like second contention, they talk about how it's like better for your future because it shows like employers that you had a better education. But truly our main response to this is that an employer isn't going to be looking at like your record of what classes you took, right? They're not going to, and if you're trying to if you're being interviewed for an engineer position, an employer isn't going to be looking at whether you took a PE class or not. They're going to be looking at whether you're competent in your field. And the way you get competent in your field is by taking more classes that actually help you in your field and not by taking useless classes that aren't contributing anything to your overall major. So more on their second contention about discovery. Again, they claim it's easier to switch majors if you're taking these classes that you really don't need. But the truth is in college, it's already pretty easy to change your major because colleges recognize that is a thing that people do. In colleges without core curriculums, there's no difference in how much effort it takes to change your major. So truly this is non-unique in a world with core curriculums, it's not easier. And again, they talk about how like students are changing their majors because they're getting introduced to new courses. But again, these core curriculum classes are classes you have basically already taken in high school. If you're taking a Math 101 class, you've already learned all of the content of that class in high school. So it's not like this class is all of a sudden going to change your life, because the truth is you've already learned that content. And so if that content was going to change your life, it's already done it already. So since you're basically just repeating things you've already known, it's not really going to be changing your life, and it's not going to be changing your mind because you've learned it already. So going over to the government's case. Oh, sorry. So on our first contention about how it is, making students waste time. So again, they say that college students don't already know everything, and like how they don't know what major they're going to go in. But in general, a college student knows kind of what area of major they want to go into, even if they don't know the specific major. A college student can know they want to go into the art field, but they don't know whether they want to do painting or graphic design, right? But regardless of what major inside of like the art field you want to go into, an art major will still have no daily use for like Pythagorean theorem, right? Even if you don't know what specific major you want to go into, you still aren't going to need certain courses because you know what general area you want to go into. And the truth is, most college students do know what specific major they go into, so this point just really doesn't apply. In addition, they also say once again that like, oh, more education is good. But our main response is, as we've said over and over, this isn't more education. This is a repeat of education you have already gotten. So it is truly a waste of time and money because you're not learning anything new. You're just hearing it in a different way that's just giving you the same exact content, and it truly isn't useful. And so also, I would just like to quote them because the opposition says, like, quote, art students still need to learn how to do things like basic algebra, but art students will already know how to do basic algebra from high school. Opposition is assuming that college students are basically like somebody going into high school, that they don't know anything. But these college students have all gone through high school and have already fulfilled high school requirements to be able to graduate. So they already have learned, basic algebra, like opposition claims they haven't. So truly, they've already learned the basic things they need. And instead, they should be taking classes that actually contribute to their future. So moving down to our second contention, more on the first contention about how it's like unwanted. Once again, they say that like, it's still like major like requirements for majors is still going to be taking time away from their like life, but for major requirements you're going to be at least taking things that you're interested in. So this point really doesn't apply, and instead kind of flows over to our side, because the requirements for a major means you're really taking classes that you actually care about because it's in the field you're interested in. So and then on our second contention, they again say that like the monetary benefits come with a well-rounded education, but cross apply everything we've said about how an employer isn't going to be looking at whether you've taken a PE class. And just on our third contention about a college environment, they say that like students can't really explore if they're not taking these college curriculums. But again, students can still explore and have a better college environment if they're not taking the core curriculums because they're actually passionate about the things they're taking. So it is exceedingly clear that it is much better for a college student and the college environment if we are regretting the popularity of these core curriculum classes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kira, and I'll be the second speaker for the opposition from Los Altos. In a quick off-time roadmap, I will first be addressing the weighing mechanism and framing of this round, and then I will go over the negatives to contentions, and then I will go over the affirmatives case. Okay. 8 minutes. Anybody not ready? Okay, my time will begin now. Let's go over the framing mechanism for today's debate. The first argument we'd like to put here is simply that we fulfill their definition in either world, because we'd argue that in the long run, the college student will probably prefer to have taken all the core curriculum classes that they have. But secondly, we say that having the average US citizen evaluate the resolution takes a step back perspective, because a college student is in college right now. Perhaps they don't enjoy taking college classes that are for the core curriculum right now, or perhaps they don't enjoy taking solely major requirements. We have no idea. We see that taking a step back and viewing this from an average US citizen is critical to ensuring that we have an unbiased perspective of what happens post-college as well, because we tell you that that is truly the result of a college education, and those are the impacts that you're going to be weighing in today's round, beyond just the in the moment, do I like this class or not? With that, let's get into the negative case. The overview here is simply that the biggest contention of today's debate is whether college students know exactly what they want and what they're going to do and how to choose the best classes that will benefit them the best. Because the affirmative seems to paint this picture of these college students being able to select entirely the best course options for them and knowing exactly what they want. Unfortunately, we tell you that this is often not true or not the case for many college students. And there's 3 reasons for this. First is that college students don't even know what field they want to go into. We told you that 80% of college students switch their majors at least once in their college career. That means that they chose a major. They had time. They could have remained undecided. They chose a major and then they changed their field. This is a big point because it means that oftentimes college students don't know what they want to go into. Experimenting is critical to helping them make this decision. But second of all, we tell you high school is insufficient experience because again, high school classes are fundamentally high school classes. Maybe you got one teacher that you didn't like and that ruined that whole class for you. That could have ruined your experience, for example, and driven you out of a field, but taking a college class could reignite that. And third of all, we tell you that college is much more than doing the classes that are solely your major or solely in the purview of what you can see. Because we tell you that college students often don't even recognize that there are a variety of other options offered by their college that aren't specifically within their major field or that could be beneficial for them to take it. For example, a significant amount of college students really enjoy taking things like cultural education classes, even though perhaps they wouldn't have even thought to take those before the core curriculum required them to. For all those reasons, we see that having a well-rounded education is good. But with that, let's get into the specifics of our first contention about having a well-rounded education. They tell you that high school is going to be able to account for everything because high school education is sufficient. We tell you this is false for 2 reasons. First, again, high school education is insufficient. People do not necessarily just appreciate the class simply because it's a high school class. Second of all, we tell you that removing these people from that high school education for 4 years means that they're essentially losing out on well-rounded education for 4 years. Like say you take math all the way up to AP calculus in high school, and then suddenly you go to college and you don't ever take a singular math class. Do you think you're going to be able to do any sort of effective math beyond after you go out of college? Probably not, because those skills aren't being reinforced. We tell you that this reinforcement is critical. Yeah?
Do you think that Do you think that a college student who didn't take any math in college would suddenly forget how to do basic algebra and multiplication?
Well, we'd argue that often math in the real world is beyond just basic algebra and multiplication. Like managing finances is definitely not just basic algebra and multiplication. Looking at things like the stock market, investments, choosing where to put your money is a very big problem. Furthermore, we tell you that well-rounded basic skills are critical to ensuring that you develop things like communication skills for people like scientists or mathematicians who need to present findings. Sure, maybe you don't like writing. Maybe that's why you're going into science. That doesn't make it any less necessary that you be able to communicate your findings in a research setting, for example, which is why we see that ensuring that people take these classes through core curriculum is critical to ensuring that we have an educated population who are able to do their roles in their jobs sufficiently. Furthermore, our opponents attempt to tell you that electives are going to resolve for all of this, but we tell you that this isn't going to resolve for anything because electives aren't sufficient to essentially enforce people to go into reinforcing critical subjects that they will need in the real world. Furthermore, we tell you that critical education sources such as cultural education and physical education are critical to ensuring that people have the basic life skills to do things like interact with other cultures, for example, expose people to cultures that they wouldn't have seen before, or instill habits of healthy education. They say that just because the resources are there, college students are going to go to them, but that is obviously not true. Having college students directed towards these resources with a core curriculum is the only way to ensure that these classes actually get taken, which is why we see that benefits improve specifically under core curriculum. Furthermore, extend that employers are specifically looking for well-rounded candidates, and maybe it's not about looking at your transcript, but oftentimes it is about the skills you gain, the networking you make. And we tell you specifically that the people who enter a core curriculum have more skills in networking and develop better critical education skills by looking at different fields. With that, let's move into our second contention about exploration. We tell you that it's not easy to change a major and that it's critical that people are able to look into other options and explore beyond that. They say it's really easy to change majors at colleges, but this is very false. Just look to the bureaucracy of the UCs, for example, changing majors. But furthermore, changing majors is made extremely difficult at the point where if you only take classes in your major and your electives, then you have 0 classes if you decide to do things such as switch a field, which means you have to create more requirements. You have to fulfill a variety of new requirements for this major of which you've fulfilled none of. That increases the time you spend in college, that increases the money that you're putting into college, and on net decreases your quality of life because now you've wasted a bunch of time putting nothing into the field that you end up going into, which makes it a lot more difficult for people. Which means that we see that having exploration, encouraging people to look at fields that they haven't even considered before, and ensuring that people actually get a better education experience in which they can switch majors more easily is critical to ensuring that people get to go into fields that they are passionate about. With that, let's go into the affirmative case. Now, again, their entire case rests on this point that college students know exactly what they want. And fundamentally, that is not entirely true because we tell you that all of these skills do not end up wasting time nor money at the point where it improves their stance with employers, it improves their ability to go into fields that they actually end up interested in, and improves the likelihood of them developing necessary life skills. Physical education, instilling that routine and discipline is critical to creating a healthy public, for example. Now, our opponents essentially tell you that it's going to be wasting a whole bunch of time because, again, this high school classes is going to be fine and people who change majors usually change within a field. That is often not the case. And we tell you that this is true specifically because of core curriculum. For example, there's a wide variety of things such as business majors who end up going to humanities, or humanities majors who end up going into even fields like STEM, biomedical engineering, simply because they've had the opportunity to take these classes and experiment significantly. This experimentation is critical to ensuring that people end up where they want to end up, which is why we see that it's ultimately not a waste of time. On their second contention about wasting money, we again tell you that it's not a waste of money to invest in something that's going to improve your career output and is second of all going to improve the ability of you to switch majors into the field that you are actually going to end up in. This is on net going to improve your ability to do things like stay in college. And finally, on their third contention about creating a college learning environment, we tell you again, just remember, we aren't eliminating major classes. You can still take electives, you can still take major requirements. You're just ensured that you have to take some of these classes that fulfill core curriculum requirements in order to ensure that you're able to graduate, which motivates people to be passionate about these classes because again, they have to pass these classes. It means that they're motivated to explore subjects they wouldn't have otherwise seen. So for all those reasons, we say that the college learning environment would increase, that people's ability to enter the workforce would increase, and on net, implementing core curriculum has done more good than harm. So for all those reasons, vote.
All right, hi judges. I'll be giving the final speech for the negation, just a quick off-time roadmap. I'll be doing an overview, talking the aff, the neg, and then Wayne. Okay. Is anyone not ready? My time starts now. Judges, let me remind you, the average college freshman is still a teenager, and the average human brain doesn't stop developing until maybe 25, if not later. Even if college students think they know what they want to do, think they know what they're going to declare their major in, it is still necessary and highly important to encourage students to explore beyond what they think they like. Having elective classes is not going to solve the issue because, again, college students are probably just going to choose what they're already experienced in or what they think they like from the classes they took in high school, rather than challenging themselves to take a class that maybe they don't like, but could be good for their education or even spark a new field of curiosity. So let's go into the more in depth into each of the arguments, starting with the affirmation case. Now, the affirmations arguments can really all be lumped into one key story. Students won't be passionate about the classes they're taking, and thus it's going to waste their time, their money, and hurt the overall classroom environment. But there are a couple of arguments here that are really key for you to extend here. One is that students are passionate. There's a reason why students go to college, knowing that there's a core curriculum. Students want that higher level education. Students want to pursue further education beyond what they took in high school. They are going to be passionate about their classes. But secondly, even if they aren't initially passionate, we're going to see that it's still going to end up not wasting their time, their money, or the classroom environment. Because often what we see is that students actually become passionate about the classes they're taking because they realize that there are interesting things beyond whatever major they've been locked into by themselves or by their parents or by peer pressure, that by taking these classes, they are exposed to something new that will, again, spark their curiosity and maybe even encourage them to change their major. So overall, what we see here is that students, one, will be passionate about the classes, so they won't be wasting anything. And even if they aren't, it's still key to providing a well-rounded education, which leads me on to the negation arguments, negation arguments. Now, overall in the neg, the AF has just one big response that, students are going to be taking repeat classes. That is going to be the same thing as high school. But there are a couple of responses here. One, they can see the argument out of my very first speech that there is a reason that people go to college because they know that even if they're knowing that there is a core curriculum, people are still going to college because colleges provide a higher education that is more advanced than high school. Extend my partner's argument that high school education is not sufficient. Again, maybe you had a terrible teacher, maybe you had a really rough year or something, or you needed a mental health break. There are multitudes of reasons why you might not have gotten the best education you could have out of high school, and why taking a college level class that is probably going to be a lot higher quality than a high school level class is going to be better for your education. We tell you that people probably aren't going to be taking repeat classes. Again, there are things like AP exams, intro exams. There's a multitude of reasons why people are going to be taking classes that are better than what they think. But going more in depth into each of the contentions, starting with the well-rounded education. Again, this is really important here because even if you aren't super passionate about your classes, you're still going to be learning something from the classes because you have to pass the class. You have to at least learn something. And this is important because getting that well-rounded education is really important for all college students and just for the average person once they get out of college. Because again, learning those critical education skills, gaining cultural awareness, gaining healthy habits from physical education, these are all really important skills that people aren't going to get if they just take what's important for their major and one or two electives that they think they're interested in. We see that getting this critical education is really important, one, for just students' education in general, but also, again, for how they compete in the job market. And quickly on the second contention about being able to change majors, again, students don't just change majors within their field. The root cause of people changing majors beyond their field is because they get exposed through core curriculum to different topics. So overall, on the impact level, you're going to see that the negation comes out winning because a well-rounded education is simply much more important than getting an education what you're currently passionate about. Because what we see is that there is a high probability that people's interests change, that people have curiosity, that people want to learn about different things. And the only way to solve for that is by forcing them to take these different classes and expose themselves to different ideas. So for all these reasons, because core curriculum is so important for critical education and for changing major, I strongly urge a vote for the negation.
Judges, I am pretty much just going to be weighing this speech. And my time will start now. Hi, I'm the last speaker for the government, affirming the resolution that this House regrets the popularity of the core curriculum in colleges and universities. I don't think the framing really matters in the end. We can win on both sides, but I would like to remind you that it just makes the most sense to look at this through the lens of your average college student, because this is the person who is primarily affected by the resolution. So this round comes down to three major voting issues, judges. The first one is the rate of dropouts. The second one is students just getting an education that is most beneficial to them long term. And the third one is the quality of the classes that you're taking in college. So the first voting issue of the rate of dropouts has the most magnitude impact in this round, because if you have a higher rate of dropout and a higher rate of people dropping out of college, then those people are wasting a lot more money, a lot more time, and long term, they're just going to have a lower quality of life because they're now like in debt from college, but they don't have the benefits of like the monetary benefits that come with a bachelor's degree. So under this contention, we tell you that people are going to be, or under this voting issue, we tell you that people are going to not drop out as much if core curriculum had never been placed in, because people would get to choose what classes they take, and they could make sure that every single class they were taking genuinely made them happy and made them fulfilled, right? There's going to be less stress. They won't feel like they're wasting time or money being in college. Opposition tells you, doesn't talk very much about it, but just kind of tries to tell you that like being able to explore more and being forced to explore more will like make you actually happier. But in reality, you're just being forced to take classes that you dislike. It's not actually helping with overall exploration. So imagine, let's do a world by world comparison. So if we have a student that takes, say, 20 classes total throughout college, and the major that they're taking has, say, 10 required classes. In the government world, if we had never implemented it, you would have seen that that student would have had 10 classes to take whatever they wanted. They could be taking classes that were in other fields, or some more classes in the field that they are really interested in, and do really whatever you want. Whereas in opposition's world, you would have 5 to 10 classes that are core curriculum that is required. You probably don't like those classes. They're probably very, very basic and mostly just repeating what you've learned in high school. And that means that you only have like between 0 and 5 classes that are not your major, that and that aren't core curriculum that you then get to explore with. So we see here that actually government's world is leading to you getting a better education because you can be more well-rounded, because you're getting to take classes you actually like. And so this is going to be when you're just going to see that there is that the core curriculum has led to an increase in dropout rates because there have been overall more unhappy people in college. So we win this voting issue. The second voting issue is just getting an education that helps your future for people who don't drop out. So we just, again, tell you that when you have complete freedom over the classes you want to take, you get to choose your major, you can switch it if you want, and you can choose all of your other classes. You're just going to make sure that it's best tailored to your future, and you're going to be most happy in college, and in your future. Opposition tries to paint a picture here that like having core curriculum is going to lead to overall more well-roundedness in your education, right? But this isn't true for a few reasons. One, we tell you that most of the things they talk about, like an art student needing to know, quote, basic algebra, that has already happened in high school. You've already taken 3 years of both English and history and 2 years of math and science in high school. So you've already gone through multiple different teachers and have like a very good, well-rounded education from high school. But furthermore, we tell you that by letting students have more freedom in their classes, they are able to take classes that actually make them more well-rounded. You can't take a class about like Polynesian history if you're stuck taking English 101 for the core curriculum requirements. So we win this voting issue because our side has a higher probability of, again, leading to more well-roundedness and leading to a education better tailored to your future. And then third voting issue, we tell you that the quality of classes will be higher in our world because you're making sure that every single person in that class actually really cares about the class. Opposition tells you, quote, that it motivates people to be passionate about these classes because you need it to graduate. This makes no sense. Just because you're forced to take class does not make you motivated and actually passionate about it. So for all these reasons, so proud to propose.
Great round.
Guys. That's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
good round.
Thank you guys for judging.